Look, I'm just gonna say it straight up because apparently everyone thinks I'm some kind of monster now. I'm Haley, I'm 32, and yeah, I made some practical decisions about my life when I was younger. Sue me for wanting security instead of chasing after guys who'd never grow up. I met Eric 6 years ago when I was 26. He worked in a different department, quiet type, always polite, but not exactly the kind of guy who made your heart skip beats, you know? I was having fun back then, dating around, enjoying being young. Eric was just there, reliable, stable, watching me from across the break room like some hopeful puppy. Sweet, but not my type at all. Fast forward to 29, and suddenly everyone's asking when I'm gonna settle down. My friends are getting married, having babies, buying houses. Meanwhile, I'm still messing around with guys who think McDonald's is fine dining and can't hold down a steady job. One lived with 3 roommates and played video games until 2 a.m. every night. Another one borrowed money from me constantly and never paid it back. Real winners, right? So yeah, I started thinking differently, started looking at what actually mattered for building a real life. And Eric? He'd been consistent this whole time. Still interested, still asking how I was doing, still treating me like I was worth something. He had his own place, a solid career, actual savings in the bank. He remembered things I told him, made me laugh, seemed genuinely excited about the idea of a future together. When I finally gave us a real shot 3 years ago, it wasn't settling. It was growing up. It was recognizing quality when I saw it, instead of chasing after excitement that never led anywhere. And you know what? We were really happy. Eric treated me better than any guy ever had. Patient when I was stressed, supportive during my medical stuff, excited about planning our future together. The thing people don't get is that love grew between us. Real love. Maybe it didn't start with fireworks, but what we built was solid and beautiful. We moved in together, planned for kids, talked about marriage. When I found out about the genetic stuff that meant I'd probably get cancer, Eric didn't even blink. Came to every appointment, held my hand through the surgery, told me I was brave and beautiful every single day. After I recovered, we decided to have kids while we still could. When I got pregnant, Eric was over the moon. Crying happy tears, already planning the nursery, calling his parents to share the news. He proposed 6 months later with this gorgeous ring he'd been secretly saving for. We were planning our wedding, talking about baby names, dreaming about our whole future together. These past few months, I've been so in love with our life, telling Eric constantly how happy I am, how much I love him, how excited I am about our family. I meant every word. By then, what we had was completely real and beautiful. I'd joke about having a crush on him just to see him smile, talk about having more babies right after this one. We were solid. When I went on maternity leave 2 weeks ago, everything felt perfect. The nursery was ready, we had names picked out, Eric was taking time off to be with us. He was so excited about being a dad, reading parenting books and practicing with a doll. We'd laugh about not sleeping for the next 18 years, and how our house was about to be taken over by tiny socks and baby gear. That's what makes everything that happened next so completely unfair. Eric's phone died on Tuesday, completely dead, wouldn't charge or turn on. He was stressed about work stuff and needed to coordinate his paternity leave, so I offered him one of my old phones. I have 2 identical ones and got confused about which was which. I handed him the wrong one, the one that still had all my old messages on it. I said it should be empty, told him to delete anything he didn't need. Never occurred to me he'd actually read through my private conversations. I mean, who does that? For hours, everything was normal. He was handling work stuff, I was nesting and making dinner. Just a regular evening with my very pregnant self and my sweet, responsible boyfriend who always worried about taking care of everyone else first. Then around 9, I heard this weird sound from the living room. Like he'd seen something shocking. When I called out asking if he was okay, he didn't answer right away, which wasn't like Eric at all. "Haley, what phone did you give me?" His voice sounded different, flat. My stomach dropped because I suddenly realized I might have grabbed the wrong phone. "What do you mean?" I tried to sound casual. "There are messages on here, between you and Delaney, from when we got together." And honestly, my first thought was annoyance. Like, why are you reading my private messages? Even old ones are still private. But I could tell from his tone he'd seen something that upset him. I walked into the living room trying to figure out damage control. He was staring at the phone with this expression I'd never seen before. Not angry exactly, more like confused and hurt and disappointed all at once. Eric never looked at me like that. He always looked at me like I hung the moon. "What did you see?" I asked, though part of me already knew. He held up the phone. "You want to explain this?" I could see our message thread open from 3 years ago when I was figuring out what to do about my life. My heart started racing because I knew how that conversation would sound to him. "Eric, that was 3 years ago," I started, but he cut me off. "3 years ago when you decided to give me a chance because I was the safest option? When you told Delaney I wasn't your usual type but had the best job prospects and would stick around for medical stuff?" Hearing it back like that, it sounded terrible. But it wasn't the whole story, definitely not how things ended up between us. "You're taking it out of context," I said. "Yes, I was thinking practically then, but look what we built together. Look how happy we are." But Eric wasn't buying it. He was scrolling through more messages, reading parts out loud that made me sound like I was shopping for husband candidates. Which maybe I kind of was. But that's not weird. That's smart. That's what mature women do. Shortest and oldest of your guys. Most stable job. Good personality. Not your usual type, but good prospects. He looked up at me with this expression that made me want to cry. "You literally ranked me against other men." "It wasn't like that," I protested, even though it kind of was. I was making a smart decision about my future. About our future. And it worked out perfectly, didn't it? The more I tried to explain, the worse his expression got. And honestly, I was getting frustrated because why couldn't he see that the outcome was what mattered? "So all of this was because you needed someone before 30, and I was the most practical choice?" "No," I said. But even as the word came out, I knew it wasn't entirely true. And I think he could see it on my face. Eric stood up and just looked at me for a long moment, like he was seeing me for the first time. "I need to think about this," he said, walking toward our bedroom. "Think about what?" I followed him, panic creeping in. "Eric, those messages don't change anything about us now." But he wasn't listening. He was pulling clothes out of drawers, stuffing them into a bag. Not frantically, just methodically. Like checking out of a hotel. "Where are you going? We need to talk about this. I'm having our baby in 2 weeks. I'm not leaving permanently. I just need space to process this. What's real is that I love you," I said, and I meant it. "What's real is our baby and our wedding plans and our life together." He stopped packing and looked at me. "Are they, though? Because it sounds like you never would have given me a chance if you hadn't been worried about turning 30 alone." "That's not true," I protested. But there was some truth to what he was saying. Maybe that's how it started, but that's not how it ended up. "I fell in love with you for real." "But would you have fallen in love with me if you hadn't needed to find someone? If you'd met me at 25, would you have given me a second look?" I hesitated too long, and that told him everything. "That's what I thought," he said, zipping up his bag. "Don't throw away everything we've built over something from 3 years ago. Don't abandon me when I'm about to have our baby." "I'm not abandoning you. I'll be here for the birth. I'll support our child. But I need time to figure out if there's anything real left between us." And then he walked out. Left me standing there, 8.5 months pregnant, feeling like my world had crumbled over old text messages that shouldn't have mattered anymore. The first night alone was horrible. I kept waiting for him to come back, kept checking my phone. The house felt enormous without him. I texted him at midnight, "Please come home. We can work through this. I love you." He didn't respond until morning. "I need more time. Take care of yourself." That's when I started getting angry. What kind of man abandons his pregnant fiancée over old conversations? What kind of person throws away a beautiful relationship because they can't handle how adult relationships actually work? I called Delaney crying. She felt terrible about the whole thing, but I told her it wasn't her fault. We'd been honest about my situation. That's what friends do. "He's being completely unreasonable," I told her, "acting like those old messages matter more than everything we built together." By day 3, I was alternating between missing him desperately and being furious. I sent him a long message about how hurt I was, how scared about going through labor alone, how unfair he was being to our baby. His response: "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm trying to figure out what's true." 8 days after he left, my water broke. 2 a.m., and my first instinct was to wake him up. But obviously, he wasn't there. I called him immediately. Voicemail: "Eric, my water broke. I'm going to the hospital. Please answer. Please be there for this." I was crying by the end. I had to drive myself to the hospital at 2 a.m. in labor because my baby's father was having a crisis about old text messages. Do you know how humiliating it is to check into labor and delivery alone? I kept calling between contractions, leaving desperate messages begging him to come. Finally, around 6 a.m., when I was panicking about going through it alone, he called back. "I'm so sorry. I had my phone on silent. I'm coming right now." He made it just as things got intense, rushed in looking exhausted and worried, immediately asking if I was okay. For a moment, it felt normal again. He held my hand, coached me through contractions, told me I was doing great. Our daughter was born at 2:17 p.m., 7 pounds, 2 ounces, perfect and healthy. When they put her on my chest, Eric was crying, telling me how amazing I was, how perfect she was. For those first hours, it felt like we were a family again, but then reality set back in. Eric was helpful with the baby, but there was this distance that hadn't been there before. He wasn't looking at me the same way, wasn't talking about our future. When people visited, he played the part of happy new father, but I could tell something had shifted. We were co-parents now, not partners. "Are you going to come home?" I asked on our last hospital night. "I'll help you get settled, make sure you have what you need." "That's not what I meant. Are we going to work through this as a family?" He was quiet for a long time. "I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to move forward when I don't know what's real." "This is real," I said, gesturing to our daughter. "Our family is real." But I could see those messages had changed everything for him. He was never going to look at me the same way again. Eric did come home for a week to help with recovery. He slept in the guest room, was perfectly helpful, but it felt like living with a stranger. He'd take care of the baby and make sure I had everything I needed, but we weren't really talking. After that week, he told me he'd found an apartment. He wanted shared custody and would pay child support, but couldn't pretend our relationship was something it wasn't. It wasn't pretend, I told him. What we had was real. Maybe for you, but I can't tell the difference anymore between what you felt and what you convinced yourself you felt because it was practical. Does it matter how it started if we ended up genuinely happy? We built something beautiful. We have a daughter together. You were planning a wedding with someone you settled for. I can't live with that. And that was it. He moved out, leaving everything we'd bought together. The baby furniture, wedding planning stuff, photos of us. He left it all like it was part of a life that never really belonged to him. The next few months were about figuring out single motherhood while dealing with everyone's reactions. Eric was a good father, took our daughter every other weekend, called regularly, but he treated me like a co-parent he barely knew. Once people found out the real reason we broke up, sympathy dried up pretty quickly. Suddenly I was the villain who'd manipulated a good man and wasted years of his life. "But you did love him eventually, right?" my mom asked. Of course I loved him. I love him now. But would you have loved him if you'd met him earlier? I couldn't answer that honestly without making myself look worse, because probably not. If I'd met Eric at 25 when I was still having fun with exciting guys, I probably wouldn't have given him a real chance. But so what? I wasn't 25 when we got together. I was ready for something stable. The judgment was exhausting. Like I was supposed to apologize for making smart choices. Like I should have waited for some perfect fairy tale that might never have come. By the time our daughter was 6 months old, I'd stopped trying to explain myself. Eric clearly wasn't coming back. He'd decided I'd used him, and nothing would change that. I started dating again, which apparently made me a monster. "How can you move on so fast?" Delaney asked. "What am I supposed to do? Wait forever for Eric to realize he's being ridiculous?" Dating as a single mother was harder than expected. Most guys lost interest hearing about the baby. Meanwhile, Eric seemed to be thriving. Friends mentioned seeing him at events, looking happy and relaxed. It was infuriating. He'd thrown away a perfectly good relationship over old messages, but somehow he was doing great while I was struggling to rebuild from scratch. 10 months after Eric moved out, Delaney called with news that destroyed me. Eric is engaged. For a second, I couldn't process it. What? I saw it on social media. He proposed to someone named Jessica last weekend. I felt punched in the chest. That's impossible. We haven't even been broken up for a year. I had to look through mutual friends' accounts since Eric had blocked me. There he was, looking happier than I'd ever seen him, proposing to some woman I'd never heard of. She was crying and laughing, looking radiant. Comments were all congratulations about how perfect they looked together. Perfect they looked together. I found their relationship announcement from months earlier. They'd been dating 6 months, which meant he started seeing her 3 months after our daughter was born. While I was struggling with single motherhood, he was already moving on. The betrayal was crushing. Not that he'd moved on. I'd been dating too. But that he'd found someone serious so quickly, someone he was ready to marry after knowing her less time than we'd planned our wedding. I spent that night cyber-stalking Jessica, trying to figure out what made her so special. She was pretty, but not stunning, had a decent job, but nothing spectacular. What did she have that I didn't? 2 weeks later, I found out Jessica was pregnant. I literally threw my phone. Not only had Eric moved on and gotten engaged, but he was having another baby, with someone he'd known less than a year. Our daughter would have a half-sibling she barely knew. I called him that night, furious. Congratulations, I hear you're engaged and having another baby. Haley, this isn't something we need to discuss. Isn't it? Our daughter's going to have a sibling and I had to find out on social media? I was planning to tell you when we figured out logistics, but yes, Jessica and I are getting married and having a baby. How convenient. You couldn't commit to me after years together, but you can commit to her after 6 months? It's different. How is it different? How is she different? Long pause. She chose me because she wanted me, not because she needed someone. I hung up because his words cut right through me. Like my reasons were somehow less valid than hers. Like making a smart, practical decision made my love less real. I was so angry, I couldn't function. Eric was building the exact life we'd planned, just with someone else. Someone who loved him the right way from the beginning. That's when I made the mistakes that destroyed everything. I reached out to Jessica directly, warning her about Eric's pattern of abandoning women when things got complicated. I told her about how he'd left me alone with a newborn over minor issues. She screenshotted it and sent it to Eric. He called immediately, angrier than I'd ever heard him. You need to stay out of my relationship. She deserves to know what kind of man she's dealing with. She knows exactly what kind of man she's dealing with, and she knows why our relationship ended. I've been completely honest about everything. That stung. The idea that Jessica knew our whole story and had chosen him anyway made me feel even more replaced. Over the next weeks, I kept inserting myself into their happiness, liking Jessica's old posts about ex-boyfriends, making subtle digs when mutual friends congratulated them. I told myself I was being honest, but really I was trying to plant doubt about whether their relationship was legitimate. The problem was, Eric and Jessica looked genuinely, disgustingly happy. Not the polite happiness Eric and I had shared, radiant joy that made other people want what they had, which made me more furious. If Eric was capable of that happiness, why hadn't he felt it with me? I started trying to turn mutual friends against them, making comments about how fast he'd moved on, how concerning it was. Some people were sympathetic at first, but as time went on, people got uncomfortable with my continued commentary. Delaney finally called me out. You need to stop. This isn't healthy, and it's making everyone uncomfortable. I'm not allowed to have feelings about my ex getting married while our daughter's still a baby. You're allowed to have feelings, but you can't spend every conversation trying to convince people their relationship is fake. It's been a year, you need to move on. But I couldn't move on. Moving on would mean accepting that Eric had found genuine love after deciding what we had wasn't real. By their wedding announcement, I was completely isolated. People stopped inviting me places because they knew I'd make bitter comments about Eric's relationship. Everything that should have been mine was playing out exactly as I'd dreamed, just with a different woman. That's when I made my biggest mistake. I decided to crash their engagement party. I'd seen the location on social media before someone remembered I shouldn't see those details. Something in me snapped. I hired a babysitter, put on my best dress, and showed up at their celebration. Eric's face when he saw me was pure horror. Not anger. Horror, like his worst nightmare coming to life. "Haley, what are you doing here? I wanted to congratulate you both and meet my daughter's stepmother." Jessica appeared beside him, even prettier up close. Glowing with pregnancy and happiness, she looked confused but not threatened. "This isn't appropriate, you need to leave." "I just want to talk to Jessica, woman to woman, mother to mother." "I don't think that's a good idea," Jessica said softly but confidently. She wasn't intimidated at all. That's when I realized Eric had told her everything. She wasn't threatened because she knew she'd won. "Did he tell you how he left me alone with a newborn? How he abandoned his family over old text messages, because that's what you're signing up for?" The party had gotten quiet. People were staring, probably recording. "I think you should go," Jessica said, firmer now. "I think you should know what kind of man you're marrying. He's going to do the same thing to you when he finds out you're not perfect." Eric stepped between us. "Enough. You're embarrassing yourself. Leave now, or I'm calling security." "The truth is embarrassing. You're a coward who runs from real commitment. She's going to find that out." Security did escort me out, while half the party watched and recorded. I spent the drive home crying and telling myself I'd done the right thing. But I knew I'd just humiliated myself in front of everyone Eric cared about. Proven everything he'd probably told Jessica about me being unstable. The next morning, someone had posted a video of my meltdown on social media. The comments were brutal. People calling me crazy, desperate, embarrassing. Former friends commenting, "I feel so bad for Eric," and Jessica handled that with such grace. That video got shared until everyone I'd ever known had seen it. Coworkers, family, random high school acquaintances. I became a cautionary tale about bitter exes who couldn't move on. Eric and Jessica's wedding went off perfectly 6 weeks later. Their baby was born healthy 2 months after that. Their social media showed nothing but happiness and the family life I'd dreamed of. Meanwhile, I was alone with our daughter, unemployed because my workplace decided I was too much liability after the viral video, watching my life fall apart because I couldn't accept that Eric had found real love. But here's what nobody understands. I wasn't wrong that Eric was a coward. The fact that he found happiness with Jessica doesn't erase what he did to me and our daughter. People act like there's some meaningful difference between why I chose Eric and why Jessica chose him. But there isn't. We both saw what he offered and decided we wanted it. The only difference is I was honest about my decision-making process. If Eric had been unemployed when Jessica met him, she wouldn't have given him a second look either. But she met the upgraded version. The confident, stable man I'd helped create through our relationship. I did the work of building Eric into who he became. Jessica got to benefit from all my effort. Now everyone acts like she's the better woman because she chose him for the right reasons. Like, love is only valid if it happens spontaneously. I know what we had was real. I know I loved Eric completely by the end. I know our daughter deserved to grow up with both parents working through problems instead of running away. Eric threw away a family over his pride. He destroyed our child's stability because he couldn't handle how adult relationships actually work. The worst part is watching Jessica live the life that should have been mine. Watching her raise Eric's children, celebrate anniversaries, grow old with the man I helped become who he is. But I'm supposed to be happy for them. Supposed to move on and co-parent peacefully while they build their perfect family. Well, I'm not happy for them. I'm not moving on, and I'm not pretending what they have is more real than what Eric and I had. Some people call that bitter. I call it honest. After everything I've been through, after losing my entire life because Eric couldn't appreciate what we'd built, I don't care what people think anymore. At least I know who I am. At least I'm not pretending my love story is some fairy tale, when it's really just two people who wanted the same things at the same time. That's more truth than most people can handle. Jessica will learn when the honeymoon phase wears off. Eric will learn when he realizes he gave up something real for something that just felt more exciting. And when that happens, I'll still be here. Still honest, still practical, still the woman who knew him well enough to build a life with him when nobody else would. I just hope our daughter grows up understanding that the truth is more complicated than the story everyone wants to believe.